What is the worst form of torture to have ever existed? U/Jeffersons_Mammoth responded. Keel hauling. For the uninitiated, it was a severe punishment meted out against sailors, where they were thrown overboard and then dragged underneath the ship. The extra nastiness of keel hauling comes from the razor-sharp barnacles on the ship's underside. Combine the fear of drowning with the sensation of being shredded by a giant cheese grater. U/Dude Broggerhauser responded. How the ancient Persians would execute the worst offenders. They'd force-feed them milk and honey, as they were tied to a boat in the middle of a shallow lake or swamp. The constant dairy would cause awful diarrhea, but the honey and lacale of wetlands would attract all kinds of flies and insects. The uncontrollable bowel leakage and onset of infection would be awful as they were exposed to the elements. After days, the offender would become a living nest as the insects would burrow into their flesh and orifices to lay eggs. U/Stormbutton responded. I once autopsied a little girl who slowly starved and dehydrated while tied up in her family home. They beat her intermittently during this, all over the course of 2-ish years. No real reason, they just felt like it. To die slowly at the hands of the people meant to keep you safe, Elle can't imagine the mental torture. She was old enough to know that she was being betrayed. She was 6 or 7 when it all started and 8 or 9 when her little body gave out. It's been decades, but I still remember that one. U/Blueberry_Mancakes responded. If it is real, then the brazen bull has to be the worst. If you're roasted steamed alive inside of a metal vessel, you won't die of smoke inhalation, you'll just literally be slow roasted to death. It will take a long time, because the fire will be lit after you're already locked inside it, so the temp will come up slowly. Your nerves will feel every second of it because they won't be damaged like they would in fire. Equally as bad is being impaled on a stake by Vlad the Impaler. He apparently had it done in such a way that you would survive the process and die slowly of exposure, shock, sepsis, etc. U/Deleted responded. Psychological torture to me is the most terrifying. The idea another person can convince you reality and your perspective are objectively wrong. Over time you begin to question reality, and then you begin to lose your grasp on reality. You eventually have a break with reality, and possibly you never regain your sanity. That to me is so much more terrifying than any kind of physical abuse. U/Pound93_ responded. 2 options. The brazen bull, also known as the bronze bull, Sicilian bull, or bull of Phalaris, was allegedly a torture and execution device designed in ancient Greece. The bull was said to be hollow and made entirely out of bronze with a door in one side. According to legends, the brazen bull was designed in the form and size of an actual bull, and had an acoustic apparatus that converted screams into the sound of a bull. The condemned were locked inside the device, and a fire was set under it, heating the metal until the person inside was roasted to death. Scaphism, also known as the boats, is an alleged ancient Persian method of execution mentioned by Plutarch in his Life of Artaxerxes. It ostensibly entailed trapping the victim between 2 boats, feeding and covering them with milk and honey, and allowing them to fester and be devoured by insects and other vermin over time. U/Zenilk responded. I think most long-term torture, weeks or months, are the worst, some kidnappings or abuse. As for standard torture methods, for me, it's the cage. They put you in a vertical cage that is sized so you can't stand straight nor sit, and they just leave you there. After a day or so, your muscles are as sore as after running a marathon, just from having to keep the position. Then you stay in that state for days or weeks, depending how much they feed you or how long they want you to suffer. U/Rosalind Danklin responded. I still remember the first time I saw this photo, the pain of not only knowing that your child was mutilated for life, because of your shortcomings *, but being presented with the evidence in the form of their severed limbs. It gutted me then and is equally disturbing now, without even being particularly graphic, and apparently the punishment ended up being much worse. If you haven't already read Heart of Darkness and King Leopold's Ghost, LD recommend picking them up. Obviously none of that fault was actually on those parents, or any perceived shortcomings. It was solely the result of the cruelty of the monsters responsible. But anyone with a child is going to blame themselves, and that sort of psychological torture is unimaginable. U/Airwalk and Music responded. Waterboarding is a very simple yet horrific torture method, and it is brutally effective, because it focuses on the primal urge to fight drowning. Shoving stuff under people's fingernails is also pretty horrific. It's a great way to inflict maximum pain for very little effort, however infection can set in very quickly too. I heard of a torture method that the torturers make you go deaf in one ear, question you, then if you don't tell them the answer, they gouge out an eye. Then the other. Then if you still don't tell them, your last ear goes, so you're deaf and blind and unable to see or hear what they plan to do to you next, so the pain and suffering is sudden and unexpected. Not a very useful interrogation method, but an absolutely despicable torture method. This freedom guy responded. Humans are devious. The gibbet was a horrible and simple torture device. It's a one-person cage, just small enough that you can't sit, and built around the victim. Then it was hung from a high spot so everyone can see. The victim would die, slowly, in there. Then they were left to rot, so anyone who thought of doing whatever it was they did could see and smell the consequences. Crucifixion was pretty horrible. The ankles and wrists are nailed to wood. If you sag down to relieve the pain on your ankles, your hyperextended arms constrict your lungs so you can't breathe. And the nails in your wrists are holding up your weight. The choice is horrible either way. It would take several days to die this way. The old drawn and quartered is horrible too. Drawn, as in pulled to near your joints breaking point by 4 horses. Then quartered, you are strapped to a table and your intestines are cut out of you, and while still attached they are grilled on a fire. Right in front of you. This does on until you bleed out. The Vikings had a few, including the blood eagle. You'd be tied to a rock or tree, then your ribs would be chopped out from the back, and your lungs pulled out so they laid on your shoulders like wings. Some of the things the Imperial Japanese came up with in WW Illinois are truly horrifying. Patrick 4356 responded. The forced sterilization experiments done at Auschwitz, where they'd open up the abdomen, cut into the uterus and place neoplastic cells, basically tumors, into them, which had no effect surprisingly. Or where 15 girls aged 17 to 18 were placed in an ultra-short wave field and had an electrode placed on their abdomen and vulva in which they would focus the rays on the ovaries until they were fried. This often caused serious burns, stomach and vulva, due to high doses of which one died directly from the burns. Other experiments included injecting what was assumed to be barium, described as white and cement-like, into the womb from the vagina, allowing them to swell like their stomachs were going to burst before letting them release the fluid with pains compared to that of child labor, and then of course they were filled up again. They also made sagittal and transverse sections of the ovaries, causing extreme hormonal changes, causing the young women to become like old women. Many would die of sepsis. Jova 1982 responded. I'm not 100% sure of this, but I do remember seeing someone somewhere that claimed that certain castles have a pit not that far from dining hall. A person could be lowered or forced into said pit, which is so small that said person can't really sit in it, but the entry is tilted, so the person can't really stand either. Also it's still steep and narrow enough that person cannot climb out of it. Said pit is located relatively near a kitchen and dining area, so the smell of food delicacies will reach said pit. On some occasions, there is rudimentary sewer system running at the bottom of said pit, too small, awkward angle that person could not possibly escape that way, without breaking both of person's legs and spine. But person could be standing in running water and potentially in human excrement. Person who goes in will be left to die, or person might be given some food scraps and water to prolong his death. Deleted responded. No question. Crucifixion. I did research for a book I'm writing. The word excruciating is derived from crucifixion. Some doctors did a medical breakdown of exactly what the process entails. The spikes go through the medial nerve of the wrist, not the palms. Shoulders and elbows dislocate, and the only way to exhale is to lift your own weight against the spike driven through the metatarsal space in your feet. As a matter of fact, it can go on for so long, the guards tire of watching you suffer. They kill you by breaking your legs so you cannot lift your body anymore and suffocate. Rainestaste responded. James Marion Sims is known as the father of gynecology. He achieved that title by experimenting with enslaved black women's bodies without anesthesia to perfect his techniques. The first person he experimented on was Lucy, who was 18 years old at the time. She had given birth and as a result had bladder incontinence. He shoved a sponge up her urethra, which led her to contract blood poisoning. He wrote that Lucy's agony was extreme, and I thought she was going to die, but still believed that black people experienced less pain than white people, and could handle whatever surgeries he threw at them. Because of his racism, he thought black people were less intelligent because their skulls grew too quickly around their brain. Based off that belief, he would operate on black children using a shoemaker's tool to pry their bones apart and loosen their skulls. A statue of him was built, but then eventually taken down in 2018 because of his methods that were controversial even for the time period he grew up in. While he made significant advancements in women's health, the nature of his surgeries are still felt today in the race gap in the medical community. Deleted responded. Honestly, I don't want to think about it, as it is depressing what humans are willing to do to each other for any given reason. Anything that takes free will from someone is horrific. Slowly cutting off body parts, making the victim more reliant on the torturer, knowing that life can never be the same again. It is one of my worst fears. One of the more fucked up things LVE read on the internet a long time ago was about how a guy would kidnap young girls, remove their teeth, cut off limbs at the elbow and knee, install eye screws into the nubs with a constant drip of meds to sustain them, and then sell these girls to other people as expiable sex dolls. The eye screws were for stringing the girls up like in a sex swing. It could be fiction, but that fact that it could happen is sadness incarnate. You/deleted responded. Probably the worst form of torture is the one a person is currently experiencing. At least, from their perspective it would be. But the one that makes me have a physical response to is being impaled. Like Vlad the Impaler was so fond of. To think of having a big pointed wooden post pushed in your rectum and out of your mouth, in such a way that you could remain alive, upright on that thing, for several days before you got to die is just terrifying. And people today think current humanity is so terrible. History makes us look positively advanced in comparison. Just think of the breast ripper, for another shocking example of past depravities. That one wasn't even designed to kill. Just cause incredible pain and lifelong maiming and scarring if they didn't go ahead and kill her anyway after ripping her breasts apart. Absolutely ghoulish what people thought up as ways to hurt each other. Makes getting shot sound pleasant by comparison. You/McNasty420 responded. I've been to the Torture Museum in a place called Alton, Illinois. And by the way, most of the stuff there had been invented and used by the Catholic Church. The one that stuck out the most to me was they hang your body upside down with both legs spread, then take a giant saw, one person on either end, and just saw you in half, starting between the legs. There was also this contraption to put on somebody's chest with a bunch of rats in it. They light a fire on top of it, and the rats eat through the person's chest cavity to escape. You/McNasty420 responded. I've been to the Torture Museum in a place called Alton, Illinois. And by the way, most of the stuff there had been invented and used by the Catholic Church. The one that stuck out the most to me was they hang your body upside down with both legs spread, then take a giant saw, one person on either end, and just saw you in half, starting between the legs. There was also this contraption to put on somebody's chest with a bunch of rats in it. They light a fire on top of it, and the rats eat through the person's chest cavity to escape. You/1 tier 3 DGIL responded. Cancer. My mom has S4 metastatic ovarian, uterine and cervical cancer. Has gone through chemo, radiation and surgery. It came back again. The scarring from radiation has caused her so much pain, doubled over, rocking and crying 15 tenths pain, when she's not in pain, and can breathe and try to eat. She is so nauseated food or water juice or pop tastes like a poo sandwich, or battery acid. All the doctors do is keep IX stronger and stronger opioids. My mom is wasting away, incoherent when she wants to take a break from the pain, and just merely existing, not living. This to me, is the worst torture imaginable, to have to choose between excruciating pain, or projectile vomiting when all you want to do is enjoy food, family and the time you have left. You/Walnut Whip Willie responded. I remember seeing somewhere that historically, one of the Native American peoples would sharpen the end of a 10-inch wide 10-foot-long pole, and drive it into the ground. They would then sharpen the other exposed end and tie the hands and legs of their victim. They would then lower them onto the spikes so that their anus was penetrated by the sharp end of the pole. They'd then start digging around the base of the pole until the person was suspended on it by their own body weight. As the pole slid through the body each day, the torturers would dig a bit more until the person was held up again by their own body weight. They'd repeat this process until death. You/Dragon411 Keeper responded. If this applies to every form, from media or otherwise, then it would have to be from the anime overlord. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then do you know what a kidney stone is? Anyway, the guy that administers the torture is this guy. And yes, it is TVMA, but what the hell, there is a NSFW tag on the post. TLDR, by far, having a kidney stone inspired torture device getting pushed up your wiener could be worse than passing a kidney stone itself. Edit, also possibly clicking the links could be torture as well. Sorry. You/Deathboy responded. Scaphism, or the boats. Taking two boats framed exactly to fit and answer each other, they lie down in one of them the malefactor that suffers, upon his back, then, covering it with the other, and so setting them together that the head, hands and feet of him are left outside, and the rest of his body lies shut up within. They offer him food, and if he refuse to eat it, they force him to do it by pricking his eyes, then, after he has eaten, they drench him with a mixture of milk and honey, pouring it not only into his mouth, but all over his face. They then keep his face continually turned towards the sun, and it becomes completely covered up and hidden by the multitude of flies that settle on it. And as within the boats he does what those that eat and drink must needs do, creeping things and vermin spring out of the corruption and rottenness of the excrement, and these entering into the bowels of him, his body is consumed. When the man is manifestly dead, the uppermost boat being taken off, they find his flesh devoured, and swarms of such noisome creatures preying upon, and, as it were, growing to his inwards. In this way Mithridates, after suffering for 17 days, at last expired. Plutarch. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this one.